You know, sometimes we spend years trying to solve a problem, and then someone comes along with an idea that never crossed our minds. That happened to me with mowing the grass. Now, I realize that doesn't sound like much of a story, but stay with me, because this little problem took me through 4 different tractors, 3 different mowing systems, one rule I swore I'd never break, and somehow ended with my wife becoming the official lawnmower operator. And today, if I even look at her mower the wrong way, I'm liable to get the look. Let me tell you how that happened. People ask me from time to time what it's like owning acreage. Well, my place is about 11 acres. Fortunately, I don't mow all 11. 3 to 4 acres are yard. The rest is mostly hayfield, and over the years I've always been fortunate enough to find someone nearby who would cut and bale the hay. That leaves the yard. Now, 3 or 4 acres doesn't sound like much to some people I know, until you're the one sitting on a mower every weekend. When I first moved there, I had what I thought was a pretty nice riding mower. It wasn't new. In fact, it had already lived a pretty full life before it came to my place. But it did the job, eventually. Like 4 hours later, eventually. When that mower finally gave up, I figured I'd solve the problem. I bought a brand new riding mower. Surely newer technology would make everything faster. It didn't. It still took 4 hours. The only real difference was that after a few years, the newer mower wore out too. And frankly, I wasn't convinced it had been built nearly as well as the older one. It finally became what every rural property owner seems to collect, a very expensive and useless yard ornament. At that point, I decided maybe I was thinking about the problem the wrong way. Instead of using a lawnmower, why not use a farm tractor? I already owned a 1957 Ford 600. That tractor was older than I am. Not by much, but it was older. So I bought a pull-behind finish mower. Now we're getting somewhere. Instead of 4 hours, I could finish it in about 3. An hour doesn't sound like much until you're saving it every weekend through mowing season. I consider that progress. But tractors have a way of reminding you that they're mechanical machines. That's when the finish mower wore out. Before long, the tractor started needing more attention. And I found myself spending almost as much time fixing equipment as I was using the equipment. That's when I made a decision. I needed to simplify my life. I wanted one machine that could do everything. If it couldn't, I didn't need it. By this point, I'd had enough. I was spending too many weekends repairing old equipment, and while I enjoy working on machinery, there comes a point when you realize you're maintaining the equipment more than it's helping you. So I came up with a rule. 1 tractor, 1 engine, 1 power source. The tractor that would do everything. Finish mowing, bush hogging, plowing, tilling, moving trailers, even baling hay. Well, I did that once. Anyway, I started looking around and finally found what I thought was a perfect replacement. This one was a used 1987 Ford diesel tractor. Big, as in 70 horsepower big. The engine had been rebuilt, it had a new clutch, it had a new fuel system. It wasn't a new tractor, but it had been well cared for and it was exactly the size I needed. Well, maybe a little larger than exactly the size I needed, but you get the idea. As Tim Taylor said, more power. Anyway, along with it, I bought a heavy-duty rear-mounted finish mower, 90 inches wide. That's 7.5 feet. Now we're talking. Suddenly, I wasn't mowing for 4 hours. I wasn't even mowing for 3. Depending on how fast the grass was growing, I could usually finish the whole yard in somewhere between 1.5 hours to 2 hours. That was a huge improvement. I finally felt like I'd solved my problem, or at least I thought I had. Of course, every solution creates a new problem. The tractor and finish mower combination was long, very long. It didn't exactly turn on a dime. Around trees, around flower beds, around the house, there were places where that big finish mower simply wasn't very graceful. Some areas still had to be cut with a push mower. Others needed the weed eater. But overall, I was happy. My one tractor philosophy was working. Or so I believed. Now, every marriage has those conversations. You know the ones. The kind where your spouse casually says something, and suddenly your carefully thought out plan isn't nearly as clever as you thought it was. One day I must have been complaining, probably for the 100th time, about mowing the grass. How long it took, how hot it was, how I seemed to spend every weekend either cutting grass or repairing the equipment that cut the grass. My wife listened patiently. Then she looked at me and said something that completely changed my thinking. She said this: "If you had something other than that big tractor, which I cannot drive, I would be more than happy to help mow the grass." Now, I have to admit, that thought had never crossed my mind. I had been so focused on finding the perfect machinery that I never stopped to ask whether I was solving the right problem. My solution had always been bigger equipment. Her solution was another operator. Those are two very different approaches. Now, I also do something else. Buying your spouse a piece of equipment for Mother's Day can be a risky proposition. There are husbands watching this right now who are smiling because they know exactly what I'm talking about. Give your wife a vacuum cleaner for Christmas and see how that works out. But somehow this was different. Maybe because it wasn't my idea. Maybe because she genuinely wanted to help. Or maybe because I finally had the good sense to let her make the decision. So for Mother's Day in 2025, we went shopping for a zero-turn lawnmower. And here's the smartest thing I did that entire day. I let her pick it out. Looking back, that may have been the smartest decision in the whole story. Now, remember the rule I mentioned earlier? One power plant, one tractor, one engine? I broke my own rule, gladly. Because sometimes life teaches you that principles are important right up until a better idea comes along. And let me tell you, that zero-turn lawnmower has been one of the best investments we've ever made. Not because it cuts the grass any better, not because it's faster, although it certainly is, but because something happened that I never expected. I don't mow the grass anymore. In fact, she won't let me. Now remember, the whole point of buying the zero-turn mower was so my wife could help. Well, mission accomplished. Maybe a little too accomplished. She absolutely loves that lawnmower. In fact, she enjoys mowing so much that I hardly ever get the chance anymore. And if I do, it's usually because she's away from home. Now, I have a little confession to make. Every once in a while, if she's out running errands, I'll sneak out to the garage, fire up the lawnmower, cut a little grass, then I carefully park it back in exactly the same spot, pointed in exactly the same direction, just hoping she won't notice. So far, I think I've gotten away with it. Although, if she's watching this video, my secret's probably out. The funny thing is, the solution to my mowing problem wasn't really buying a zero-turn mower. It was having someone who genuinely enjoyed doing something I had grown tired of. I never saw that coming. Of course, if you've owned equipment for very long, you already know what comes next. Nothing mechanical stays perfect forever. This past week, my wife was happily mowing along when an encounter with one perfectly placed stick in the yard changed the whole afternoon. That stick managed to disturb a drive belt underneath the mower. That belt, in turn, took out the cooling fan and stopped the wheels from turning. And just like that, her favorite mower wasn't mowing anything. It was finished. Now, if this had happened 20 years ago, I probably would have crawled underneath it with a flashlight, a socket set, and enough determination to make matters considerably worse. But remember the 4 questions from that previous video? One of them is it worth my time? In this case, the answer was easy. The truck came this morning, they loaded up the lawnmower, took it to the dealership, and now we wait. The funny part isn't that the mower broke. Machines do that. The funny part is what happened afterward. There's been a notable lack of enthusiasm around the house. Let's just say there is no joy in Mudville. Until that lawnmower comes home, someone is going to be doing a lot of looking out the window at grass that's getting just a little bit taller every day. You know, when I first started telling the story, you probably thought it was going to be about tractors or zero-turn mowers, or maybe how to mow a large yard. It really wasn't. It was about solving problems and discovering that sometimes the best solution isn't the one you spent years looking for. Over the years, I've learned that most property owners eventually face the same decision. Do I keep doing things the way I've always done them, or is there a better solution? Sometimes the answer is buying different equipment. Sometimes it's repairing what you already have. Sometimes it's calling a professional. And every once in a while, the best solution comes from someone sitting across the dinner table. Owning property, especially rural property, isn't about maintaining buildings and equipment. It's about constantly adapting, learning, changing your mind when a better idea comes along, and occasionally admitting someone else had the better idea all along. If you've got acreage, a tractor, or even just a riding lawnmower, I'd love to hear your own stories. What's the best or maybe the funniest lesson you learned trying to maintain your property? Leave it down in the comments. I read everyone. And who knows, your story might become the inspiration for a future video. If you enjoyed this one, I'd appreciate it if you'd click the like button and subscribe. Here on the channel, we talk about real estate, rural property ownership, older homes, and what it's really like to live here in Central Virginia. Until next time, I'm Tom Wolfick. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me, and happy mowing.